When most people think about the sun sign, they think about their personality. They hear Aries or Taurus or Gemini, and they immediately think of the traits that belong to those signs, or the behavior or the quality of the strength that sign may have, as well as its weaknesses. If you've listened to my videos before, you'll know how special I think the sun is. The reason for this is that the sun is the only true body of light in the solar system. Everything else receives, reflects, or moves around that light. And esoterically, that matters because in the birth chart, the sun represents the inner spiritual center. It is the divine spark and the core essence. It's the solar light within us that is trying to become conscious through human experience. So the deeper question is not simply, what is my sun sign? The deeper question is, what is the quality of this pure light that's trying to come through me? What is the pure essence? In other words, what is the pure essence beneath the role I learned to play, or beneath the emotional patterns I inherited, or my survival identity, my survival strategies, or beneath the false self, which I speak about in my previous videos. If you care to learn more about that, you can watch my video on the moon and the false self. So beneath the false self, beneath everything I became in order to feel safe, accepted, loved, or understood, because many of us are not living from the pure and authentic expression of our sun sign. We're living through the moon's emotional conditioning. We're living through the ascendant survival role, and we're living through old wounds, both conscious and unconscious, family patterns, karma, fear, expectations, and also unconscious identities. And over time, those patterns can become so familiar that we mistake them for who we are. But the sun points to something more essential. It shows the inner light trying to become conscious through us. It shows the authentic core of who we are, not as the person playing the role, and not as the personality that wears the mask, but as a living expression of our soul essence. So in astrotheology, the sun has always been connected to life, illumination, resurrection, divine consciousness, and the Christ principle, the light within the human being that remembers its divine origin, its divine sovereignty. So when we look at the sun sign this way, we're not only asking what are the traits of this sign, we're asking, how does the soul shine through this sign? How does the ego distort that light? And how does shadow work help us to return to the authentic expression of that inner sun? So in this video, I'm going to move through each sun sign, of course, from a deeper perspective. So each sign will look at what is the pure essence of this sign, what is the esoteric or astrotheological meaning behind it, and how does the ego distort that light? And how does the authentic sun begin to express when it becomes more conscious? Because your sun sign is not just who you appear to be. It is the light within you learning how to shine without distortions. But before I go deeper, welcome to Starwell Astrology. My name is Shari. I'm a Western tropical astrologer, but I do have a very special interest in shadow work, emotional healing, esotericism, mysticism, and astrotheology. So I blend these topics together intentionally because I see how they fit together. And from that, I believe astrology has a much deeper meaning than the one that we have given it or have become accustomed to. So on this channel, I explore astrology as a sacred map of self-awareness, not just to understand the personality, but to recognize the unconscious patterns, to integrate the shadow, and to return to the authentic self. And if these ideas resonate with you and you're interested in exploring shadow work, astrology, and the deeper layers of spiritual awakening, you're welcome to subscribe, like, hype. Thank you for those who have hit the hype button. I appreciate it. And also share with anyone who might find this interesting or helpful. I also host a free shadow work circle every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, which is 4 p.m. Pacific, where we practice self-witnessing, emotional awareness, and shadow integration in a grounded way. I also offer natal chart readings and one-on-one shadow work guidance if you'd like a more personal approach. All this information can be found on my website at starwellastro.com. So with that in mind, let's begin with Aries. Sun in Aries. The sun in Aries is often reduced to being bold, impulsive, aggressive, competitive, impatient, and even self-centered. And yes, Aries can express as direct, forceful, passionate, assertive, but those surface level traits do not capture the deeper essence of this sign. The pure essence of Aries is not aggressive, it's ignition, which is the first spark. It is the first moment outward. It's the first breath of incarnation. It is the raw surge of consciousness that says, I am here. So where Pisces dissolves back into the infinite, Aries emerges as the first flame of individual existence. Since Pisces is the pool or the void of everything, Aries is the individual self. It is the beginning of the zodiacal wheel and the first impulse of spirit entering form. And it's the first declaration of life, moving from potential into action. So when the sun is in Aries, the inner light seeks to express itself through courage, vitality, instinct, will, directness, and it is self-initiated movement. And there is something in Aries that is not meant to wait for permission. It is meant to move, to act, to take risks, to begin, and to discover itself through direct experience. So esoterically, Aries carries the mystery of the divine spark because it's the first flame of individualized consciousness. And this is why Aries connects so deeply to the phrase, I am. Not I'm the role, not I'm the identity, not I'm what others approve of, but the primal spiritual declaration, I am. The first recognition of being. In astrotheology, Aries begins at the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere, where the sun crosses the threshold and light begins to rise again from the darkness of winter. And this is the resurrection point of the zodiacal wheel. The moment life pushes upward and the seed breaks open and creation begins again. So Aries is not just personal will. Aries is the resurrection fire. It is the fire that breaks through inertia, the spark of renewal, the lamb of spring. It's a sacred impulse that says life must begin. This is why Aries carries the archetype of the warrior and the pioneer. And it's also the deeper warrior. But the deeper warrior is not only the one who fights outwardly. It's the one who has the courage to incarnate, say yes to being here, to enter life and to move when the soul feels the spark. So the gift of the sun in Aries is not just confidence. It is the living fire. It's the ability to initiate, animate, take the first step, and to move something from potential into reality. So at its highest, Aries is courageous, it's vital, it's honest, it's passionate, it's self-propelled and willing to meet life directly. It reminds us that consciousness is not only meant to reflect, it is meant to act. But the shadow of Aries begins when the sacred fire becomes ego defensive, because the same force that allows Aries to move courageously can, when unconscious, become reactive, dominating, controlling, impulsive, combative, and very self-centered, instead of clean will that comes through innocence. Aries may become driven by urgency. Instead of acting from presence, it may act from agitation. And instead of acting from courage, it may perform its strength. And by perform strength, I mean that there can be a need to win, push, dominate, or prove the self in order to avoid vulnerability. And this is where Aries can become misunderstood. People may see the sharpness and the impatience and the anger or the confrontational edge and assume Aries is simply immature or aggressive. But often what is really happening is that person has not yet learned how to hold that much life force consciously. There is a difference between pure will and reactive will. Pure will moves from truth. Reactive will moves from threat, from insecurity, or the need to defend identity. And this distinction is very important for the sun in Aries because Aries can sometimes confuse impulse with truth. And it may believe that because something feels urgent, it must be authentic. And it might also assume that when the impulse is strong, it must be aligned. But it must learn that not every urge is aligned and not every reaction is true action. Sometimes the fire is real, but the direction is distorted. And sometimes the action is coming from a younger part of the self that feels it has to fight in order to exist. And this is where the sacred I am becomes distorted. Instead of I am here, the unconscious Aries wound says, I have to prove I am here. Instead of moving from divine will, it pushes through the ego defense. So the shadow of the sun in Aries can look like impatience, anger, defensiveness, even forcefulness, selfishness, competitiveness, over-identification with independence, or needing to be first in order to feel valid. So it can display itself as interrupting before listening, or leaving before feeling, or reacting without reflecting, or turning vulnerability into conflict because softness feels too exposed, or mistaking confrontation for courage, mistaking speed for alignment, or mistaking self-protection for authenticity. And this is where shadow work becomes important because Aries is not here to suppress its fire. It's here to purify the will to act, but from a pure state. So the deeper work of Aries is learning the difference between instinctive force and conscious action. Strength is not the same as hardness. Strength is not the same as reactivity. And directness is not the same as aggression. And authentic action doesn't need to be fueled by conflict in order to be real, because Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars gives Aries its fire, its instinct, its courage, and the willingness to meet life. But Mars must be purified through consciousness, or the warrior becomes reactive instead of sacred. And the unconscious warrior fights because it feels threatened, and the conscious warrior acts because truth requires movement. The unconscious warrior needs an enemy, but the conscious warrior protects the flame of life. So the deeper shadow question for Aries is this: am I acting from presence and truth, or am I reacting in order to protect a fragile or underdeveloped sense of self? That is the real work of Aries, because when the sun in Aries becomes conscious, it becomes a force of creative emergence, a living yes, a sacred being, a willingness to move without apology when something true is ready to be born. So the path of Aries is not to stop moving. It is to make movement conscious. It is to let will serve truth, and to let your actions come from alignment rather than reaction, and to let fire becomes life-giving rather than defensive, and to allow courage to include vulnerability, and also to let the warrior protect the soul rather than defend the ego. Because the purest Aries is not just to fight for existence. Aries is here to embody the sacred declaration of existence itself. I am here, I am alive, I am the spark of beginning, and I allow the fire of my soul to move through me as courage, action, and divine will. Sun in Taurus. Sun in Taurus is often reduced to being stubborn, materialistic, slow, possessive, sensual, or they may resist change. And yes, Taurus can express a steady, fixed, grounded, pleasure-seeking, and deeply attached to what feels familiar. But those surface level traits do not fully capture the deep essence of this sign. The pure essence of Taurus is not stubbornness, it is embodiment, because Taurus is the sacred yes. to physical existence. It's the soul learning how to inhabit the body, the senses, the five senses, the earth, the voice, the breath, the rhythm of life, and the beauty of the material world. So where Aries says, yes, I am here, Taurus says, I am rooted here. I'm in the body. Aries is the first spark of incarnation, but Taurus is the first stabilization of that spark. So Aries ignites the fire of life, but Taurus gives the fire substance, rhythm, weight, and form. Taurus teaches consciousness, how to slow down enough and how to actually experience life, smell the roses, to feel the body, to touch the earth, and to receive beauty, and also to recognize value and to build something real over time. And when the sun is in Taurus, the inner light seeks to express itself through steadiness and presence and patience, as well as simplicity, loyalty, beauty, sensuality, and the ability to bring spirit into matter. There's something in Taurus that's not meant to rush. It is meant to deepen, to root, to stabilize, and also to cultivate and to listen to the wisdom of the body. And esoterically, Taurus carries the mystery of sacred matter. This is where the spirit enters density and discovers that the physical world is not separate from the divine. The earth is not lower than spirit. The body is not an obstacle of the soul, and matter is not something to escape. Matter is the temple. The body is the altar, and the senses are the gateways. Taurus reminds us that spiritual awakening does not only happen above the head, it also happens through the body, the breath, through the voice, through food, through touch, through stillness and nature and beauty. It is the ability to be fully present inside physical life. And this is why Taurus is one of the greatest signs of embodiment. In astrotheology, Taurus is connected to the bull, an ancient symbol of fertility, strength, life force, abundance, and the regenerative power of the earth. The bull represents life made tangible. It is the force that plows the field and nourishes the land and sustains the body and turns the invisible value into the visible form. So Taurus also carries Venusian mystery because Venus is the ruler of Taurus, and it's not only about love, pleasure, beauty, and attraction. Esoterically, Venus represents the principle of harmony. She's the first feminine principle after Mars, the first masculine principle. So Venus reveals the principle of harmony within matter, because now that there's two, masculine and feminine, they must work together in unison through harmony. So she shows us that beauty is not superficial when it reflects divine proportion, and that pleasure doesn't have to be indulgence when it's connected to the soul presence, and that value is not only what we own, value is what the soul recognizes as sacred. So Taurus teaches the soul how to feel God in the real, in the body, in the garden, in the meal, in the music, in the voice, in the earth, and in the slow and faithful rhythm of becoming. And the gift of the sun in Taurus is not just stability, it is sacred embodiment. It is the ability to bring light into matter and to become beautiful, tangible, to turn value into lived reality, to create consistency, loyalty, nourishment, and peace in a world that often moves too quickly to feel anything deeply. And at its highest, Taurus is grounded, devoted, sensual. It is also patient and self-possessed. It's practical and loyal and deeply connected to what is real. It resonates with what's tangible. It also reminds us that consciousness is not only meant to awaken, it is also meant to inhabit. But the shadow of Taurus begins when embodiment becomes attachment, because the same force that allows Taurus to be rooted deeply in life can, when unconscious, become resistant, possessive, stagnation, or over-identification with materials, with comforts, with security. Instead of grounded presence, Taurus may become driven by the need to preserve what feels familiar. And instead of resting in inner value, Taurus may seek value through possessions and relationships or validation, as well as money, beauty, status, or control over the physical environment. So instead of stability, it becomes stuckness. And instead of loyalty, it becomes attachment. And where there should be peace, it may become a refusal to move because movement feels threatening. And this is where Taurus can become misunderstood. People may see the stubbornness, the slowness, the resistance, or the attachment and assume Taurus simply refuses growth or that it's just too lazy. But often what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned how to feel safe inside change. There's a difference between grounded stability and frozen security. Grounded stability comes from inner value. Frozen security comes from fear of loss. And this distinction is very important for the sun in Taurus because Taurus can sometimes confuse familiarity with truth. They may believe that because something is known, it is safe. And it may assume that because something is comfortable, then it's aligned. And it may hold onto people and patterns and places and possessions and routines or identities because letting go feels like losing the ground beneath the self. But not everything familiar is nourishing and not everything comfortable is true. So sometimes the body clings to what is known because the nervous system has not yet learned how to trust life beyond the old form. And this is where the sacred temple becomes distorted. Instead of the body becoming a temple of the soul, the body can become a hiding place for fear. Instead of matter becoming sacred, matter can become something the ego uses to feel secure. And instead of beauty reflecting inner harmony, beauty can become a way to prove worth. So instead of stability serving the soul, stability can become a cage. So the shadow of the sun in Taurus can look like stubbornness, possessiveness, emotional rigidity, over attachment to comforts, fear of uncertainty, resistance to inner transformation, or defining the self through what can be held, owned, secured, or controlled. And it can look like staying too long in what has become stagnant or holding onto relationships that no longer nourish the soul or mistaking survival security for true peace. Avoiding emotional comforts through food, money, routine, sensual pleasures, or the familiar habit and patterns, or refusing to move because the unknown feels too unstable. And this is where shadow work becomes important because Taurus is not here to abandon the body. Taurus is here to purify its relationship to embodiment. The deeper work of Taurus is learning the difference between true value and false security. True value is internal. False security depends on external form remaining unchanged. When Taurus forgets its own value, it may try to create safety by holding on to outer form. But the soul cannot fully awaken if it is only willing to live inside what already feels familiar. So the deeper shadow question for Taurus is this: am I rooted in my true value, or am I clinging to what feels familiar because I'm afraid to change? That is the real work of Taurus. Because when the sun in Taurus becomes conscious, it becomes a living temple, a calm, steady presence, a soul that knows how to build, sustain, cultivate, embody beauty and the physical world. So the path of Taurus is not to stop seeking stability. It is to discover stability within. It is to let value come from essence rather than possessions, and to let comfort come from nourishment rather than avoidance, and to let the body become the temple rather than the hiding place, and also to let beauty become an expression of the soul rather than a way to prove worth. Also to let the earth hold you without needing to control everything life takes. Because at its purest, Taurus is not here to cling to matter. Taurus is here to reveal that matter itself is sacred and to say, I am here, I am rooted, I am worthy, I'm embodied light, and I allow the soul to become real through the body, the earth, and the life I patiently cultivate. Now let's move into Gemini. So Sun in Gemini. Sun in Gemini is often reduced to being talkative, scattered, inconsistent, restless, curious, clever, and mentally distracted. And yes, Gemini can express as quick, verbal, adaptable, social, and mentally active, but those surface level traits do not fully capture the deeper essence of the sign. The pure essence of Gemini is not scattered thinking, it's perception. Gemini is the movement of consciousness through the mind. It is a sacred exchange between thought, word, breath, and meaning. It is the soul learning how to observe, name, connect, question, and communicate. Where Aries says, I am here, Taurus says, I'm rooted here, but Gemini says, I'm aware of what is here. So Gemini is the first sign that consciousness begins to look around and make connections. It is the awakening of the mind as a bridge between inner and outer reality. So Aries may act, Taurus embodies, and Gemini perceives. So when the sun is in Gemini, the inner light seeks to express itself through curiosity, communication, language, learning, movement, observations, and the ability to connect one thing to another. And there is something in Gemini that is not meant to remain fixed in one viewpoint. It is meant to inquire, to listen, to speak, to gather, to translate, and to move between worlds, thoughts, people, and possibilities. And esoterically, Gemini carries the mystery of Mercury, the messenger, the trickster, and the psychopomp. Now, Mercury is the one who moves between worlds. He moves between heaven and earth and between the conscious and the unconscious. He moves between the seen and the unseen and the upper world of thought and the lower underworld of hidden meaning. So Gemini is not simply about talking, thinking, and gathering information. Gemini is about perception. It is the mind learning how to move between multiple levels of reality. It can see from more than one angle, not just two, but many. It can hold more than one possibility and make meaning from both or many. It can notice the patterns, the contradiction, the symbol, the message, and the meaning beneath the surface. And this is why Gemini can be such a powerful translator, because Gemini can take what is moving in the field and give it language. It can make connections that others miss. It can bring movement to places where perception has been fixed. And it can ask questions that open new doors of awareness. But this is also where Gemini's shadow begins, because Mercury is the trickster. And the trickster quality of Mercury is not only about deception, it's about the instability of perception itself. The mind can translate truth, but the mind can also distort truth. The mind can receive a message, but it can also mistake its interpretation of the message for the whole reality. And this is where Gemini can trick itself. It may believe what I perceive is all there is, and what I think about is what is true, and what I can explain is what I understand. But perception is not always truth, and thought is not always awareness. So this is very important for Gemini, because Gemini has the gift of perceiving more than most and can move between views. It can gather information from the surface and from the atmosphere and from the symbolic field and from the unseen and from the subtle spaces between things. But because Gemini sees so much, it can also become scattered across too many perceptions. Instead of resting in deeper awareness, the mind keeps moving, and instead of entering truth, it circles around possibilities. And instead of feeling what is present, it explains what is happening. Also, instead of embodying wisdom, it may just gather information for the sake of gathering information. And this is where the sacred messenger can become the trickster of the ego, because the mind can become so active, so clever, so fast, and so full of interpretations that it begins to create a world of its own. It may think it is seeing clearly when it is actually seeing through anxiety and emotional memory and the nervous system activation or old beliefs. So the gift of the sun in Gemini is not just intelligence, it's translation. It is the ability to carry light through word, thought, language, breath, and meaning. And at its highest, Gemini is perceptive, adaptable, curious, articulate, humorous, mentally alive, and able to carry information from one place to another. It reminds us that consciousness is not only meant to act or embody, it is meant to perceive, connect, and communicate. But the shadow of Gemini begins when perception becomes fragmented, because the same force that allows Gemini to move between ideas, possibilities, and perspectives can, when unconscious, become scattered attention, nervous distraction, overthinking, inconsistency, mimicry, or disconnection from deeper truth. Instead of using the mind as a bridge, Gemini may become trapped in the mind as a maze. Instead of communication, there may be constant explanation. And instead of curiosity, there may be avoidance. Also, instead of adaptability, it may be shape-shifting to avoid being fully known. Gemini is often known as the chameleon. It can take the shape of whatever it needs to take in order to fit in. And so instead of perception, there may be distortion through too many thoughts moving too quickly to be witnessed. And this is where Gemini can become misunderstood. People may see the restlessness, the talking, the changing, the inconsistency, and assume Gemini is shallow. They're seen as two-faced, liars, maybe even unreliable. But often what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned how to anchor perception in the body. There is a difference between true curiosity and nervous distraction. And true curiosity opens awareness, but nervous distraction avoids stillness. And this distinction is very important for the sun in Gemini, because Gemini can sometimes confuse information with understanding. It may believe that because it can name something, it has integrated it. And it may assume that because it can explain a feeling, that it has actually felt it. And it may collect ideas, language, teaching, and systems without allowing any of them to descend into lived embodiment. But information is not the same as wisdom, and explanation is not the same as integration. And sometimes the mind keeps moving because stillness would reveal what the body is carrying. So the shadow of the sun in Gemini can look like overthinking, nervous talking, distorted attention, intellectualizing emotions, inconsistency, mental avoidance, gossip, mimicry, or using words to stay one step removed from direct experience. It can look like speaking before feeling, explaining before witnessing, jumping from one idea to the next before the first one has landed, turning everything into language because silence feels too exposing, or knowing many things but struggling to stay present with one truth long enough for it to transform itself. And this is where shadow work becomes important, because Gemini is not here to silence the mind. Gemini is here to purify perception that comes through a silent mind. But the deeper work for Gemini is learning the difference between mental movement and conscious awareness. The mind can think about truth, but awareness witnesses truth. And the mind can explain the wound, but awareness allows the wound to reveal itself. The mind can create stories around experiences, but awareness can see the story forming. And this is the real initiation of Gemini, because Gemini carries the gift of witness. And the reason for this is that it can actually be present. They're air sign, and in the air, there can be stillness. So when it becomes conscious, it can observe thought without becoming trapped inside thought. It can notice the patterns without immediately turning it into another concept. And it can recognize the mind is a messenger, but it is not the whole self. So the deeper shadow question of Gemini is this: am I using the mind to perceive truth, or am I using the mind to avoid feeling what truth is showing me? That is the real work of Gemini. Because when the sun in Gemini becomes conscious, Mercury becomes sacred, the trickster becomes the revealer, the mind becomes the bridge, the words become the carrier of light, and perception becomes a doorway into deeper truth. So Gemini becomes a sacred messenger, the clear witness, the translator of consciousness, a soul that can move between worlds and bring language to what others only sense but cannot yet name. So the path of Gemini is not to stop thinking, but it's to let thought become transparent to awareness, to let language serve truth rather than avoidance, and curiosity to become presence rather than escape, and to let communication become revelation rather than performance, and to allow the mind to become the bridge rather than the hiding place, and also to let perception descend into the body so understanding becomes embodied wisdom. Gemini rules the nervous system. So when the nervous system is able to become regulated, perception becomes clearer. And at this point, we can get the purest expression of Gemini. Gemini is not here to scatter light. Gemini is here to carry the light through word, through breath, through mind, and through meaning. So it says, I am here, I'm listening, I'm perceiving, I'm the sacred messenger of consciousness, and I allow the light of my soul to move through me as language, insight, and living connection. Sun in Cancer. So Sun in Cancer is often reduced to being emotional, sensitive, moody, nurturing, protective, attached to family, traditional, and easily hurt. And yes, Cancer can express as deeply feeling, caring, protective, sentimental, and emotionally responsive. But those surface level traits do not fully capture the deeper essence of this sign. The pure essence of Cancer is not moodiness. It is emotional intelligence. Cancer is the sacred womb of consciousness. It is the first inner home. It's the soul learning how to feel, protect, remember, nourish, and create belonging from the inside out. Where Aries says, I'm here, Taurus says, I'm rooted here. Gemini says, I'm aware of what is here. Cancer says, I feel what is here. Cancer is the first sign where consciousness turns inward and discovers the emotional body. Life is no longer only movement, sensation, and perception. It becomes memory, feeling, attachment, belonging, and inner safety. So when the sun is in Cancer, the inner light seeks to express itself through emotional depth, through care, intuition, protection, tenderness, remembrance, devotion, and the capacity to create a sacred inner home. There is something in Cancer that is not meant to live only on the surface. It is meant to feel, to shelter, to nurture, to remember, and to listen beneath the words, to sense the emotional atmosphere around it. So esoterically, Cancer carries the mystery of the moon, the lunar receiver of light. So if the sun is the solar principle, divine masculine as the source of radiance and conscious light, then the moon is divine feminine mirror that receives, reflects, contains, and gives the light emotional form. So the moon has no light of its own in the physical sense, yet it reveals the sunlight in the darkness. And this is the mystery of Cancer. Cancer shows us that consciousness does not only become real through action, thought, or outward expression. It also becomes real through feeling, memory, receptivity, and the womb of inner life. The solar principle illuminates, the lunar principle receives, the solar principle radiates, the lunar principle reflects. The solar principle brings light into consciousness, but the lunar principle, the moon, carries the light into the emotional body, into memory, into family, ancestry, into the hidden waters of the soul. So Cancer is not simply emotional sensitivity. Cancer is the sacred feminine container through which light becomes felt. It is the inner womb where experience is received, remembered, nourished, protected, and eventually transformed into emotional wisdom. And this is why Cancer is so connected to mother, home, ancestry, family, memory, childhood, and the inner child. These are not just sentimental themes, they're lunar themes. They're the place where consciousness first learns whether life feels safe enough to be received. So Cancer holds the emotional imprint of belonging. It remembers what the mind may try to explain away. It senses what has not yet been spoken. It feels the atmosphere beneath the words. So the gift of the sun in Cancer is not just nourishing, it's sacred protection. So Cancer knows that life cannot fully unfold without emotional safety. It understands that the soul needs a place to soften, a place to return, a place where the inner child, the memory body, and the emotional self can be held. And at its highest, Cancer is intuitive, devoted, caring, emotionally wise, protective, receptive, loyal, and deeply connected to the unseen currents of feeling. But the shadow of Cancer begins when emotional sensitivity becomes emotional protection. Because the same lunar water that allow Cancer to receive and reflect light can also become clouded by old pain. The moon reflects light, but it can also distort light depending on the water through which it reflects. So if the emotional body is clouded by fear, grief, abandonment, family wounds, rejection, or old memories, conscious or unconscious, then Cancer can no longer reflect the present clearly. It can begin reflecting the past into the present. And this is where Cancer can become misunderstood. People may see the sensitivity, the defensiveness, the emotional reaction, or the tendency to withdraw and assume Cancer is simply fragile or overly emotional. But often what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned how to separate present moment feeling from old emotional memory. And there's a difference between emotional truth and emotional memory. Emotional truth is what is alive now. Emotional memory is what the body remembers from before. And this distinction is very important for Sun in Cancer because Cancer can sometimes confuse familiarity with belonging. And it may believe that because something feels emotionally familiar, they may assume that because a pattern has history, it has meaning, and they may stay attached to people, wounds, family roles, childhood identities, or emotional stories because letting go feels like losing a part of the self. But not everything familiar is home, and not every emotional bond is nourishing. So sometimes the body clings to the past because the inner self has not yet learned how to feel safe in the present. So the shadow of the sun in Cancer can look like emotional defensiveness, fear of abandonment, guilt, caretaking, indirect expression, clinging to the past, over identifying with family pain, or protecting the wound instead of feeling it. It can look like giving care in order to receive love, or withdrawing to see who will come after you, or remembering every hurt but struggling to release the emotional charge, or mistaking emotional intensity for intimacy, or feeling responsible for everyone else's feelings while ignoring your own, or building a shell around the heart and then wondering why no one can reach you. And this is where shadow work becomes important because Cancer is not here to reject the emotional body. Cancer is here to purify the waters. The deeper work of Cancer is learning the difference between emotional sensitivity and emotional identification. Sensitivity allows feeling to move through. Identification says, This feeling is who I am. Now, Cancer's gift is the emotional body, but its initiation is learning how to witness emotion without drowning inside of it. The feeling may be real, but the story behind the feeling may be old. The hurt may be real, but the identity built around the hurt may be ready to soften. So the deeper shadow question for Cancer is this: am I feeling what is true now? Am I protecting an old emotional memory that still feels like home? This is the real work for Cancer, because when the sun is in Cancer, it becomes conscious, it becomes the sacred mother within, the keeper of emotional truth, the lunar vessel that reflects the solar light without distortion, the one who knows how to create safety without control, or care without abandonment, or intimacy without clinging. So the path of Cancer is not to become less sensitive. It is to become conscious inside sensitivity, to let care come from fullness rather than fear, to let protection serve love rather than defensiveness, and to let memory become wisdom rather than identity. Also to let tenderness become strength rather than a reason to hide, and to allow the inner child to be witnessed without allowing the wounded child to direct the whole life. Because at its purest, Cancer is not here to live inside emotional memory. Cancer is here to redeem emotional memory through love, awareness, inner belonging. It says, I'm here, I'm feeling, I'm safe within myself. I am the sacred vessel of emotional light. I allow the lunar waters of my soul to reflect truth, nourish life, and to become a home for what is tender, wise, and ready to be loved. Sun in Leo. Sun in Leo is often reduced to being dramatic, attention-seeking, proud, charismatic, creative, playful, or self-centered. And yes, Leo can be seen as expressive, warm, confident, theatrical, magnetic, but those surface level traits do not fully capture the deeper essence of this sign. The pure essence of Leo is not performance, it's radiance. Leo is a sign ruled by the sun itself. It is the sacred heart of the zodiac. It's the soul learning how to shine from the center of its own being. Where Aries says, I'm here, Taurus says, I am rooted here. Gemini says, I am aware of what is here. And Cancer says, I feel what is here. Leo says, I shine from what is here. Leo is where consciousness begins to recognize its own light. It is the awakening of creative selfhood. It is the heart-centered expression. It is joy. It is courage. It is the desire to bring something alive from within. And when the sun is in Leo, the inner light seeks to express itself through creativity, warmth, generosity, play, loyalty, courage, dignity, and authentic self-expression. There's something in Leo that is not meant to hide. It is meant to shine, to create, to express, to live boldly, to stand in the heart, to radiate life from the center of the self. And esoterically, Leo carries the mystery of the solar logos, the divine light individuated through the heart. The sun is the central light of the solar system. It's the source of illumination, warmth, vitality, and life. Everything in the solar system receives from it. And when we speak of Leo, we're not just speaking about being seen. We're speaking about the inner sun, the spiritual center, the sacred heart, the throne of divine radiance within the self. Leo rules the heart, and this is important because the heart is where we do not simply think about who we are. The heart is where we begin to know what is true through feeling. The heart knows when love is alive. The heart knows when something wants to sing. The heart knows when the soul is being warmed from within. So Leo is not just confidence or expression. At a deeper level, Leo is the solar spark becoming conscious through the heart. It is the longing to feel the divine within. It is the inner light seeking to recognize itself in love, creativity, joy, courage, and sacred radiance. And this is where Leo connects to Christ consciousness, not as a religious idea, but as an awakened heart, the solar principle within the human being, the sacred inner sun that shines through love, generosity, creative force, and inner authority. In astrotheology, the sun represents the life-giving principle, the light that rises, reveals, warms, resurrects, and animates creation. And this is why solar symbolism is so connected to kingship, to resurrection, to divine sonship, to the Sacred Heart and the Christ principle. Because Leo carries the solar mystery inside the human being. And this is the deeper distinction in Leo. There's the false king and there's true sovereignty. The false king needs attention to feel powerful. True sovereignty radiates because the heart is aligned with the inner sun. The false king performs the light. The true sovereign becomes transparent to the light. So the gift of the sun in Leo is not just confidence, it is creative radiance. It is the ability to bring warmth, vitality, courage, and joy into form. It is the ability to animate others through the heart. It is the ability to live alive in the heart, to remind people that life is not just meant to be survived, analyzed, protected, or endured, that life is meant to be expressed, lived, felt. At its highest, Leo is loving, creative, dignified, generous, courageous, loyal, playful, and able to lead from the heart rather than from domination. It reminds us that consciousness is not meant to act, embody, perceive, communicate, or feel. It is meant to shine. So the shadow of Leo begins when radiance becomes performance, because the same force that allows Leo to express light can, when unconscious, become pride, vanity, attention seeking, dramatization, arrogance, insecurity, or dependence on external validation. Instead of expressing from the heart, Leo may begin to perform for applause. And instead of radiating from inner truth, it may seek confirmation from the outside world. So instead of creating from joy, it may create in order to be admired. So instead of leading from love, it may seek to be centered, praised, or recognized. And instead of shining from essence, it may build from identity around being special. And this is where Leo can become misunderstood, because people see the drama, the pride, the need for attention, or the strong personality and assume Leo is simply self-absorbed. But often what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned to separate authentic visibility from the need to be validated. There is a difference between radiance and performance. Radiance comes from the heart. Performance comes from the wound that is still asking to be seen. Because Leo can sometimes confuse being noticed with being known. It may believe that if they are admired, they're truly seen. And they may assume that applause is the same as love. And they may also begin shaping themselves around what gets attention instead of what expresses as truth. But being watched is not the same as being witnessed, and being praised is not the same as being loved. Sometimes the self performs because the heart still carries the old ache around being unseen, dismissed, shamed, ignored, or made to feel like they're too much. And this is where the solar light becomes distorted. Instead of the sun radiating from the center, the personality begins orbiting around the mirror. It starts looking outward for proof of its own light. Tell me I'm special. Tell me I'm loved. Tell me I'm seen. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be seen. The heart needs love. The heart needs warmth. The child within us does need recognition, encouragement, and love. But Leo becomes unconscious, and the wound can begin using visibility as a substitute for inner authority. So the shadow of the sun in Leo can look like pride, insecurity, dramatization, attention seeking, jealousy, comparison. It can also be creative block, fear of humiliation, or needing to be special in order to feel worthy. And it can look like exaggerating emotion to feel seen, or withdrawing warmth when recognition doesn't come, or competing with others instead of creating from the heart, or performing confidence while secretly fearing rejection, or needing to be the center because the inner child still feels overlooked, or hiding the true self behind a polished image because real vulnerability feels too exposed. And this is where shadow work becomes important, because Leo is not here to stop shining. Leo is here to purify the need to be seen. The deeper work of Leo is learning the difference between authentic expression and ego performance. Authentic expression says, "This is what is alive in my heart," and the ego performance says, "Please confirm that I matter." Leo's gift is visibility, but its initiation is learning how to be seen without becoming dependent on the mirror. The applause to feel good cannot become the source of light. Recognition may be beautiful, but it cannot replace inner authority. And love from others may nourish the heart, but it cannot become the condition for self-expression, because the sun does not ask permission to shine. It rises because it is the sun. And that is the spiritual lesson of Leo, to return to the inner sun, to stop performing the sun, and to begin embodying it. So the deeper shadow question for Leo is this: am I expressing from the truth of my heart, or am I performing in order to feel worthy of being seen? And this is the real work for Leo, because when the sun in Leo becomes conscious, it becomes a living flame of the heart, presence that warms others without needing to dominate them, a soul that creates because the light is overflowing, not because the wound is starving for attention. So the path for Leo is not to become smaller, it is to shine from a truer place, to let creativity come through joy rather than validation, to let visibility become service rather than performance, to let confidence rise from inner alignment rather than praise, and to lead and come from the heart rather than needing the need to be the central figure. And also to let the inner child be witnessed without demanding the outer world constantly prove its worth. Because at its purest, Leo is not here to perform the self. Leo is here to reveal the sacred heart as the throne of the inner sun. It says, "I am here, I am radiant, I'm sovereign in my heart. The light I seek is already within me, and I allow the solar light of the soul to shine through love, creativity, courage, and joy." Sun in Virgo. Now, Sun in Virgo is often reduced to being analytical, critical, perfectionist, practical, organized, anxious, and overly focused on the details. So Virgo can express as precise and observant, as well as discerning and deeply aware of what needs refinement. But those surface level traits don't fully capture the deeper essence of this sign. The pure essence of Virgo is not critical, it's purification. As a matter of fact, Virgo Pisces axis is one of the more complex axes in the chart. And it's often misunderstood because Virgo has a very deep archetypical meaning. So Virgo is a sign of refinement, and it is the soul learning how to bring consciousness into the smallest detail of life. It is the sacred process of making the inner and the outer life more refined, more honest, more useful, and more whole. So while Aries says, "I'm here," and Taurus says, "I'm rooted here," and Gemini says, "I'm aware of what is here," and Cancer says, "I feel what is here," and Leo says, "I shine from what is here," Virgo says, "I refine what is here." So Virgo is where the light of consciousness begins to notice what needs care, adjustment, healing, integration. It sees the patterns, it sees the disorder, it sees what is fragmented, excessive, unclear, or out of alignment. So when the sun is in Virgo, the inner light seeks to express itself through discernment, through humility, through devotion, being helpful, meaning being of service. through healing or some kind of skill or some kind of sacred attention, and the desire to bring the self into the right relationship with life. There's something in Virgo that is not meant to be careless. They tend not to want to take risks. Instead, they're meant to notice, refine, purify, improve, and serve, as well as bring order to where there's fragmentation. And esoterically, this is when Virgo becomes more complex, because Virgo carries the mystery of the Virgin. But the Virgin doesn't simply mean untouched or sexually pure in the surface sense. Esoterically, the Virgin represents the soul that belongs to itself. It's the pure archetype of the soul. It's a part of consciousness that is whole, intact, and aligned in its own divinity. So Virgo's true intention around purification, when understood more fully, is not really about becoming more perfect on the outside. It's about inner purification. It is the soul asking, what within me is ready to be cleansed? What in me is ready to be refined? What in me is ready to come back into sacred order? And what within me is no longer aligned with the divine pattern I am here to embody? And this is a deeper Virgo path. The external refinement, the routines, the organization, the health, the practice, the corrections, the service, the attention to detail, the efficiency, all that is only outer expression of a deeper internal process. Because Virgo wants to become clean enough, clear enough, refined enough, honest enough, humble enough to align in its own divinity. So the cleanliness is not really meant in a moralistic way. It means clean as in undistorted, meaning clear perception. That's why they're discerning. Also humble enough to realize what it is that needs to be refined so that they can see more clearly. Also, they're ruled by Mercury, which is our awareness and perception of awareness. So Virgo is where the cleaning, refining, and purifying happens at the inner level through being present and being available for sacred work. So in astrotheology, Virgo is often connected to the sacred feminine, the Virgin Mary, the vessel that carries divine life into form. And Virgo is the womb of refinement, where the divine seed is protected, purified, and prepared for embodiment. So Virgo is not merely practical. Virgo is the priestess energy. It's the temple tending energy. It's the sacred service energy. It's the one who prepares the vessel. It is the one who cleans the altar. And when we say altar, I don't mean physical altar, and I don't mean physical vessel. We're talking about the body as the vessel, and the altar is the higher mind. It is the one who notices where the sacred has become cluttered by distortion, habits, fears, emotional unhealed wounds, or what is unconscious. So the gift of the sun in Virgo is not just usefulness, it's the sacred discernment. It's the ability to see what needs care without losing sight of the soul. It's the ability to bring healing into ordinary life. And it is the ability to make the everyday world a place where spirit can be practiced. At its highest, Virgo is humble. It's wise, precise, healing, devoted, discerning, skillful, and deeply connected to sacred service. Virgo reminds us that consciousness is not only meant to shine, it is also meant to become refined enough to serve. So the shadow of Virgo begins when refinement becomes self-rejection over criticism, because the same force that allows Virgo to purify, heal, and discern can, when unconscious, become judgment, criticism, shame, anxiety, overanalysis, perfectionism, control, or the feeling that the self is never good enough. Instead of sacred refinement, Virgo may become trapped in endless corrections. Instead of devotion, it may become pressure. Instead of humility, it may become self-erasure. Instead of service, it may become overfunctioning. And instead of purification, It may begin attacking the very self it's trying to heal. And this is where Virgo can become misunderstood. People may see the critique, the worry, and the correction, or the need for order, and assume Virgo is simply picky or impossible to satisfy. But often, what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned how to separate discernment from self-judgment. And there is a difference between refinement and rejection. Refinement says this can become more aligned, and rejection says this is not good enough to be loved. And this distinction is very important for the sun in Virgo, because Virgo can sometimes confuse purity with perfection. They may believe that if they could fix enough, heal enough, improve enough, organize enough, become clean enough, or be useful enough, they could finally feel worthy. But perfection is not the same as purity. And perfection tries to remove every flaw. Purity returns to what is true. So sometimes the Virgo wound forms around the belief that divinity can only be accessed once the self has been corrected. But the deeper truth is that Virgo's sacred work begins when the self is witnessed and with honesty, not condemnation through shame. So the shadow of the sun in Virgo can look like harsh self-criticism, chronic improvement, anxiety, overthinking, perfectionism, fear of mistakes, emotional restraint, or feeling valuable only when they're being useful. And it may look like trying to fix others or trying to improve others. And this is to avoid them feeling their own inner disorder, or staying busy so that stillness doesn't reveal discomfort, or judging the body instead of listening to it, or confusing service with self-sacrifice, or trying to purify the outer life while avoiding the inner wound, or believing rest must be earned. And this is where shadow work becomes important, because Virgo is not here to stop refining. It is here to purify the impulse behind refinement. The deeper work of Virgo is learning the difference between sacred discernment and wounded perfectionism. Sacred discernment serves truth, and wounded perfectionism serves fear. So sacred service comes from devotion. Wounded service comes from the need to earn worth. Virgo's gift is refinement, but its initiation is in learning how to refine without rejecting, and serve without disappearing, and purify without becoming harsh towards the human self. So the deeper shadow question for Virgo is this: am I refining myself from devotion to truth, or am I trying to perfect myself because I do not feel worthy as I am? And that is the real work of Virgo, because when the sun in Virgo becomes conscious, it becomes a sacred vessel of healing intelligence, a humble servant of truth, a temple keeper, a soul who knows how to bring spirit into the smallest detail of life. So the path of Virgo is not to abandon discernment, it's to make discernment loving. It's to let refinement come from devotion rather than shame, and service that comes from fullness rather than self-erasure, and to let the body be listened to rather than judged, and to let ordinary life become sacred practice, and to allow purification to mean returning to truth, not punishing imperfection. Because at its purest, Virgo is not here to prove it's not good enough. Virgo is here to become clear enough to serve what is sacred. It says, I am here, I'm refining, I'm devoted to truth. I am the sacred vessel being purified from within. And I allow the light of my soul to become visible through humility, healing, service, and divine order. Sun in Libra. Sun in Libra is often reduced to being charming, indecisive, people-pleasing, romantic, social, polite, or overly concerned with fairness. And yes, Libra can express as graceful, diplomatic, relational, thoughtful, and deeply aware of harmony and imbalance. But those surface level traits do not fully capture the deeper essence of this sign. The pure essence of Libra is not people-pleasing, it's sacred balance. So is the soul learning how to meet life through relationships, through reflection, through beauty, through justice, through harmony, peace, as well as conscious exchange. So where Aries says, I'm here, and Libra says, I meet you here. Aries awakens the individual self, but Libra brings the self into relationship with others. So when the sun is in Libra, the inner light seeks to express itself through harmony, fairness, beauty, grace, partnership, reflection, and the ability to recognize the sacred balance between self and other. And there's something in Libra that is not meant to live in isolation. It's meant to mirror, to relate, to harmonize, and to refine through beauty, and to seek right relationship, understand itself through the field of connection. Now, and esoterically, Libra carries the mystery of the scales. The scales are not only about social fairness and making sure everything is equal on the surface. They represent divine law, inner balance, the weighing of the heart. And ancient Egyptian symbolism, the heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the principle of truth, justice, balance, and cosmic order. And this speaks deeply to Libra, because Libra is always asking, is this balance? Is this true? Is this fair? Is this harmony with the deeper law of the soul? But the deeper weighing is not only between two people, it's within the self. So Libra seeks to know its own divinity through balance, through the restoration of inner harmony, and through the moment when the heart becomes light enough, honest enough, clear enough to stand in truth without distortion. This is where Libra connects to the peace that surpasses all understanding. And not a shallow peace that avoids conflict, but a deeper peace that comes when the soul is no longer split between what it truly feels and what it performs to keep harmony outside itself. That is the sacred Libra path, because Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus is not only about beauty, romance, or attraction. Venus in Libra reveals the divine principle of harmony, the intelligence of proportion, of symmetry, of relationship, and of sacred order. So Libra knows that beauty is not just appearance. Beauty is alignment, inner alignment. Beauty is when the inner and the outer world reflect a deeper harmony. Beauty is when relationship becomes a mirror for truth within yourself, rather than a place that the self disappears. So the gift of the sun in Libra is not diplomacy. It's a sacred relational intelligence. Libra can sense imbalance in a room. It can feel where something is unfair or harsh or awkward or disconnected or out of proportion. It carries the ability to bring grace where there is tension, beauty where there's disorder, and reflection where there is unconscious projection. At its highest, Libra is gracious, fair, wise, beautiful, relational, intelligent, discerning, peaceful, and committed to the right relationship. Libra reminds us that consciousness is not only meant to know itself alone, it also is meant to know itself through others, through relationships, or through the relationship to others. But the shadow of Libra begins when harmony becomes performance, because the same force that allows Libra to create beauty and balance can, when unconscious, become people-pleasing, avoidance, indecision, self-abandonment, passive resentment, or fear of disrupting the peace. So instead of true harmony, Libra can seek approval. Instead of balance, it may try to keep everyone comfortable. Instead of fairness, it may overconsider others by losing contact with its own truth. And instead of peace, it may avoid conflict so carefully that the inner self becomes divided. And this is where Libra can become misunderstood. People see the indecision, the charm, the politeness, or the desire to keep the peace and assume Libra is simply weak or superficial. But often what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned how to stay connected to the self while in relationship with another. There is a difference between sacred harmony and false peace. Sacred harmony includes truth. False peace avoids truth to preserve comfort. And this distinction is very important for Sun in Libra, because Libra can sometimes confuse being agreeable with being loving. And it may believe that if everyone is pleased, then everything is balanced. And it may assume that conflict means something has gone wrong, or may shape itself around what keeps the outer environment pleasant, while the inner heart quietly becomes heavy with unspoken truth. But peace without truth is not harmony, and agreement without authenticity is not balance. So sometimes Libra keeps weighing everyone else's heart while forgetting to listen to its own. So the shadow of the sun in Libra can look like people pleasing, avoidance, indecision, resentment, over accommodation, fear of rejection, dependency on partnerships, or losing the self in the mirror of another. It can look like saying yes when the heart means no, or smoothing things over while the body feels unsettled, or performing grace while silently carrying resentment, or avoiding necessary conflict because discomfort feels like failure. Or they may need another person's approval before trusting one's own inner knowing, and mistaking relationship harmony for soul alignment. And this is where shadow work becomes important, because Libra is not here to abandon harmony. Libra is here to purify its relationship to harmony. The deeper work for Libra is learning the difference between balance and self abandonment. Balance honors both sides. Self-abandonment sacrifices one side to keep the other comfortable. True peace is not about the absence of conflict. True peace is the presence of inner alignment. Libra's gift is relationships, but its initiation is learning how to remain whole while inside a relationship, to love without disappearing, to listen without losing center, to consider the other without betraying themselves, to choose beauty without covering over truth, and to seek peace without abandoning the heart. So the deeper shadow question for Libra is this: am I creating harmony from truth, or am I performing peace because I'm afraid to disturb the balance? And this is the real work of Libra, because when the sun in Libra becomes conscious, it becomes a vessel of sacred balance. It's a keeper of beauty, a mirror of divine law, a soul that knows how to bring grace, fairness, and harmony into the world without losing its own center. So the path of Libra is not to stop caring about others. It is to include the self in the balance. It is to let fairness include your own heart, and to let beauty be rooted in truth, to let peace come from alignment rather than avoidance, and to let relationship become a mirror for consciousness rather than a place where identity is traded for approval. Because at its purest, Libra is not here to please everyone. Libra is here to restore harmony through truth, beauty, and divine balance. It says, I'm here, I'm balanced, I'm listening to the heart. I am the sacred scale of truth and beauty, and I allow the light of my soul to become peace, harmony, and right relationship. Sun in Scorpio. Sun in Scorpio is often reduced to being intense, secretive, sexual, jealous, controlling, dominating, mysterious, or emotionally complicated. And yes, Scorpio can express as deep, private, magnetic, passionate, penetrating, and emotionally powerful. But those surface level traits do not fully capture the deeper essence of this sign. The pure essence of Scorpio is not darkness, it is transformation. Scorpio is the soul learning how to enter the hidden places. It is the sacred descent into what has been buried, repressed, feared, desired, wounded, or kept in the shadow. So where Libra says, I meet you here, Scorpio says, I merge with what is hidden here. Scorpio is where consciousness moves beneath the surface. It is no longer satisfied with appearances, politeness, beauty, or outer harmony. Scorpio wants truth at the root. It wants to know what is real behind the mask, what is alive beneath the silence, what is wounded beneath the reaction, what is powerful beneath the fear, and what is sacred beneath the shame. And so, when the sun is in Scorpio, the inner light seeks to express itself through depth, emotional honesty, intimacy, transformation, devotion, instinct, power, and the courage to face what others may avoid. Here, there is something in Scorpio that is not meant to stay on the surface. It is meant to penetrate, to cover, to feel deeply, to transform, to reveal what has been hidden, to descend into the underworld and return with power. And esoterically, Scorpio carries the mystery of death, rebirth, and emotional alchemy. This is the sign that understands that the soul cannot truly merge with the divine while remaining divided from its own hidden nature. It knows that it needs to face its shadow. So Scorpio has a deep desire to merge, not only with another person, but with truth, with life force, with a divine connection from beneath form. But often that merging can become sacred. But before that merging can become sacred, Scorpio must dig up every impurity, every hidden wound, every unspoken fear, every buried desire, every place where the self still does not trust itself. And this is why Scorpio is such a powerful sign of shadow work. It knows that what is hidden still has power. The wound that is buried still shapes desire. The fear that is denied still shapes intimacy. And the shame that is hidden is still shaping identity. And pain that is repressed still shapes the way we love, protect, control, and survive. So Scorpio descends, not because it loves suffering, but because it knows that the hidden self must be brought into consciousness before the soul can become whole. So in astrotheology, Scorpio is often connected to the underworld, the serpent, the scorpion, the eagle, and the phoenix, the symbols of lower instinct transformed into higher vision. The scorpion represents the defensive sting and the survival self that protects the wound. And the serpent represents the life force, the sexual energy, kundalini, and the hidden wisdom. And the eagle represents the ability to rise above the lower nature and see clearly. And the phoenix represents resurrection through fire, the self reborn after passing through death. So Scorpio is not simply intense. Scorpio is the alchemist. It takes poison and turns it into medicine. It takes the shadow and turns it into power. It takes pain and turns it into wisdom. And it takes emotional darkness and reveals the hidden light inside it. The gift of the sun in Scorpio is not just depth. It is the capacity for radical transformation. At its highest, Scorpio is emotionally honest, it's perceptive, it's loyal, it's powerful, it's devoted, it's healing, penetrating, and capable of holding truth without looking away. And Scorpio reminds us that consciousness is not only meant to seek peace, it is also meant to descend into the hidden places and reclaim the life force trapped inside the wound. But the shadow of Scorpio begins when depth becomes control, because the same force that allows Scorpio to uncover truth can, when unconscious, become suspicious, obsessive, secretive, emotionally manipulative, jealous, intense, create power struggles or fear of betrayal. So instead of the sacred merging, Scorpio may seek control. Instead of emotional honesty, it may test and be suspicious. Instead of intimacy, it may hide. Instead of transformation, it may become attached to crisis. Instead of trusting the process, it may try to possess the outcome. And this is where Scorpio can become misunderstood. People may see the intensity, the secrecy, the suspicion, the jealousy, or the emotional edge and assume Scorpio is simply difficult or dangerous. But often, what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned how to trust what has been wounded. There is a difference between sacred depth and emotional control. Sacred depth says, I'm willing to meet the truth. Emotional control says, I must protect myself from being hurt again. And this distinction is very important for the sun in Scorpio, because Scorpio can sometimes confuse intensity with intimacy. It may believe that if something feels consuming, it must be love, and it may assume that emotional fusion means trust, and it may enter deep bonds while still carrying hidden fear, suspicion, or shame beneath the surface. But intensity is not always intimacy, and merging is not the same as trust. Sometimes Scorpio seeks depth with another because it has not yet fully faced the depth within itself. So the shadow of the sun in Scorpio can look like emotional testing, secrecy, jealousy, obsession, control, fear of betrayal, power struggles, withdrawals, or becoming attached to pain because pain feels familiar. It can look like needing to know everything while revealing very little, or feeling deeply but guarding the heart fiercely, or testing loyalty instead of asking for truth, or reading the hidden motives into everything, or holding on to old betrayals to prove that trust is unsafe, or trying to control vulnerability rather than surrender into honesty. And this is where shadow work becomes essential, because Scorpio is not here to fear the shadow. Scorpio is here to transform it. The deeper work of Scorpio is learning the difference between protection and possession, between intuition and suspicion, between emotional depth and emotional entanglement. And Scorpio's gift is the ability to uncover what is hidden. But its initiation is learning how to face what it finds without becoming consumed by it. So the wound may be real, but the defense around the wound may be distorting what is present. The desire may be real, but the desire must be purified before it becomes sacred merging. And the fear must be real, but the fear cannot be allowed to become the ruler of intimacy. So the deeper shadow question for Scorpio is this: am I seeking the truth so I can transform? Or am I searching for danger because part of me still does not feel safe enough to trust? This is the real work for Scorpio, because when the sun in Scorpio becomes conscious, it becomes one of the most powerful expressions of the sun. It becomes emotional alchemy, a soul that can descend without losing itself, a presence that can meet shadow without becoming shadow, a heart that can merge without possession, a being that can understand that true power is not control, it's transformation. So the path of Scorpio is not to become less intense. It is to make intensity sacred, to let desire become devotion, to let vulnerability become truth, to let power become healing, to let emotional depth become wisdom, to let the hidden wound become a doorway into wholeness. Because at its purest, Scorpio is not here to stay hidden in the darkness. Scorpio is here to uncover the hidden light within the darkness. It says, I'm here, I'm descending, I'm transforming. I am the alchemy of the hidden self, and I allow the light of my soul to enter every wound, every shadow, every desire, and every buried truth until nothing within me has to remain separate from the divine. Sun in Sagittarius. The sun in Sagittarius is often being reduced to being adventurous, blunt, optimistic, freedom-loving, restless, philosophical, always seeking the next experience. And yes, Sagittarius can express as enthusiastic, honest, expansive, curious, drawn towards travel, wisdom, and exploration. And those surface level traits do not fully capture the deeper essence of this sign. The pure essence of Sagittarius is not restlessness, it is higher truth. Sagittarius is the soul learning how to seek meaning beyond the immediate world. It is a sacred fire that asks, what is the larger pattern? What is the higher law? What is the truth behind the experience? So where Scorpio says, I descend into what is hidden here, Sagittarius says, I rise towards what this means. So Sagittarius is where consciousness to lift its gaze beyond survival, beyond attachment, beyond emotional intensity, and begins seeking the wisdom behind the journey. So when the sun is in Sagittarius, the inner light seeks to express itself through wisdom, faith, vision, exploration, emotional seeking, truth seeking, spiritual study, adventure, and the desire to understand from a higher perspective. There's something in Sagittarius that is not meant to remain confined because it is meant to seek. It needs the freedom to seek, to question, to explore, to expand, to aim beyond the known, and to follow the inner fire towards truth. And esoterically, Sagittarius carries the mystery of the arrow pointing upwards and outwards. And this is consciousness aiming beyond the lower self towards the higher path. Sagittarius is the archer, the seeker whose instinct is aimed towards something greater than the immediate moment. And this is why Sagittarius is connected to prophecy, teaching, wisdom, sacred law, spiritual pilgrimage, and the search for divine meaning. It wants to understand the larger story. It wants to know why the soul is here, what the journey means, what truth governs reality, what law lives beneath the surface of experience. Because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, it carries the principle of expansion. But Jupiter is not only about luck, abundance, and optimism. Esoterically, Jupiter represents the higher wisdom, divine order, faith, and the enlargement of consciousness. Jupiter expands whatever it touches, but Sagittarius asks that that expansion becomes wisdom. In astrotheology, Sagittarius comes after Scorpio's underworld descent, after the soul has gone into the shadow, death, desire, and the emotional alchemy. Sagittarius lifts the arrow towards the heavens and says, "What did this teach me? What truth did I recover from the darkness? What higher law is guiding the path?" So the gift of the sun in Sagittarius is not just freedom. It's a sacred vision. It's the ability to see beyond the wound, beyond the moment, beyond the limitation, and recognize that life is part of a larger unfolding. At its highest, Sagittarius is wise, inspired, honest, generous. It's a visionary. It's faithful, humorous, and able to turn experiences into meaning. Sagittarius reminds us that consciousness is not only meant to transform, it is also meant to understand. But the shadow of Sagittarius begins when truth becomes escape, because the same force that allows Sagittarius to seek wisdom, when unconscious, becomes avoidance, exaggeration, dogmatic, spiritual superiority, restlessness, bluntness, or an inability to stay present with what is directly in front of it. Instead of seeking truth, Sagittarius can chase stimulation. Instead of wisdom, it could collect beliefs. Instead of faith, it can bypass discomfort with optimism. And instead of freedom, it may avoid responsibility. Instead of higher law, it may become attached to being right. And this is where Sagittarius can become misunderstood. People may see the bluntness, the restlessness, the exaggeration, or the constant seeking and assume Sagittarius is careless or unserious. But often what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned how to bring higher truth into embodied honesty. There's a difference between wisdom and belief. Wisdom is lived, belief is claimed. And this distinction is very important for the sun in Sagittarius, because Sagittarius can sometimes confuse conviction with truth. It can believe that because something feels inspiring, it must be true. It may assume that because it can see the bigger picture, it doesn't have to tend to the details. Or it may speak from certainty before the truth has been fully embodied. But inspiration is not always integration. And knowing a philosophy is not the same as living the teaching. Sometimes Sagittarius keeps moving towards the next horizon because staying still would require feeling what has not yet been integrated. So the shadow of the sun in Sagittarius can look like restlessness, spiritual bypassing, overconfidence, preaching, exaggeration, avoidance of emotional depth, fear of confinement, or the need to turn every experience into a lesson because it has not been fully felt. It can look like speaking truth without sensitivity, or leaving when life asks for commitment, or using optimism to avoid grief, or confusing freedom with escape, or turning wisdom into superiority, or collecting spiritual assistance without embodying the one truth already being revealed. And this is where shadow work becomes important, because Sagittarius is not here to lose faith. It's here to purify its relationship to truth. The deeper work of Sagittarius is learning the difference between higher wisdom and mental certainty. Higher wisdom opens the soul. Mental certainty protects the ego. So Sagittarius's gift is vision, but its initiation is in learning how to bring vision down into the body, into relationships, into humility, into lived experience. Truth is not only about what we proclaim, it's about what we become. Faith is not only the belief that life has meaning, faith is the willingness to stay present long enough for meaning to reveal itself. So the deeper shadow question for Sagittarius is this: am I speaking truth with an open heart? Am I using belief, optimism, or freedom to avoid what life is asking me to face? That is the real work of Sagittarius. Because when Sun in Sagittarius becomes conscious, it becomes a sacred teacher, a wisdom keeper, a traveler of both outer worlds and inner worlds, a soul that can hold the arrow of consciousness steady and aim towards the divine without abandoning the human path beneath its feet. So the path of Sagittarius is not to stop seeking, it is to seek with humility. It is to let truth become embodied rather than preached, to let freedom include responsibility, let faith include emotional honesty, to let wisdom come from lived experiences rather than only belief, and to let the arrow point towards the divine while the feet remain grounded on the earth. Because at its purest, Sagittarius is not here to run from life in search of meaning. Sagittarius is here to reveal that life itself is a sacred journey. It says, I am here, I am seeking, I am guided by higher truth. I am the sacred arrow of consciousness, and I allow the light of my soul to become wisdom, faith, freedom, and divine understanding. Sun in Capricorn. The sun in Capricorn is often reduced to being ambitious, serious, hardworking, disciplined, status-oriented, emotionally reserved, or obsessed with success. And yes, Capricorn can express as responsible, focused, structured, practical, and deeply aware of long-term goals. But those surface level traits do not fully capture the deeper essence of this sign. The pure essence of Capricorn is not ambition, it's mastery. Capricorn at the soul level learns how to bring spirit into form through discipline, maturity, responsibility, patience, and embodied wisdom. Where Sagittarius seeks meaning, Capricorn asks, can you live what you know? Capricorn is where the soul meets the mountain. It is where the consciousness is tested through time, structure, consequences, effort, karma, and the material world. So when the sun is in Capricorn, the inner light seeks to express itself through integrity, through discipline, through endurance, through responsibility, leadership, spiritual maturity, and the ability to build something real from the inside out. There's something in Capricorn that is not meant to remain unformed. It is meant to mature, to climb, to build, to commit, and to embody wisdom, and to turn inner authority into lived reality. And esoterically, Capricorn carries the mystery of Saturn. Saturn is the gatekeeper of the material world. Saturn is the boundary of form, the keeper of time, the lord of karma, the teacher of consequence, and the archetype that says, not yet, do the work. Become ready to hold what you are asking to receive. So Capricorn is not simply about worldly success. Capricorn is about initiation through form. It teaches that we access the divine within by facing the karmic structure that keeps consciousness trapped in fear, shame, survival, limitation, or false authority. This is why Capricorn can feel heavy, because Capricorn carries the memory of responsibility, the weight of incarnation, the burden of unfinished karma, the pressure to become something real. And this heaviness is also sacred because Saturn does not block the soul as punishment. Saturn reveals where the soul has not yet become embodied enough to pass through the gate. So Capricorn is a sign that teaches you cannot bypass the mountain, you climb it. You cannot escape form. You must master your relationship with it. You cannot access true spiritual authority while still avoiding the shadow of responsibility, fear, limitation, and wounded karma. So Capricorn's deeper path is not about proving worth through achievement. It's about becoming internally strong enough to carry spiritual authority without distortion. In astrotheology, Capricorn is connected to the winter solstice, the darkest point of the year in the northern hemisphere, when the sun appears to be at its lowest point. And then it begins a slow return towards the light. And this is where Capricorn carries the mystery of light born from the darkness. It is a sign of the initiate. It is the soul in the cave. It is the hidden light inside matter, the place where the divine spark must endure density, time, hardship, and limitations in order to become mature enough to rise. So the gift of the sun in Capricorn is not just discipline, it is embodied authority. It is the ability to stand in reality without losing contact with the soul, and to build with patience, to carry responsibility with dignity, to turn hardship into wisdom, and to become a living structure through which spirit can work. So at its highest, Capricorn is wise, steady, mature, grounded, responsibility, discerning, committed, and capable of leading from inner authority rather than external control. Capricorn reminds us that consciousness is not only meant to dream, feel, perceive, or transform, it is also meant to become real. But the shadow of Capricorn begins when mastery becomes control, because the same force that allows Capricorn to build, endure, and mature can, when unconscious, become rigidity, fear, emotional suppression, over responsibility, workaholism, status seeking, or the belief that worth must be earned through struggle. Instead of true authority, Capricorn can seek outer validation. Instead of maturity, it can become hardened. Instead of responsibility, it can carry burden that were never truly its own. Instead of building from the soul, it may build from fear. Instead of honoring time, it may feel trapped by time. This is where Capricorn can become misunderstood. People may see the seriousness, ambition, the emotional restraint, or drive for achievement and assume Capricorn only cares about success. But often what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned how to separate true inner authority from survival pressure. And this is the difference between embodied mystery and wounded control. Embodied mystery says, I am ready to carry what is mine. Wounded control says, if I do not stay in control, everything falls apart. And this distinction is very important for Sun in Capricorn, because Capricorn can sometimes confuse achievement with worth, but may believe that if it works hard enough, becomes successful enough, proves itself enough, or carries enough responsibility, then it will finally feel safe, respected, and worthy. But achievement is not the same as inner authority, and responsibility is not the same as self-abandonment. Sometimes Capricorn climbs a mountain because the soul is ready for mastery, but sometimes it climbs because the wounded self believes rest, softness, or joy must be earned. So the shadow of the sun in Capricorn can look like emotional suppression, fear of failure, harsh self-judgment, overworking, rigidity, control, pessimism, isolation, or defining the self through status, productivity, or accomplishment. It can look like carrying too much alone, or feeling guilty when resting, or mistaking vulnerability for weakness, or becoming the authority outwardly while feeling unworthy inwardly, or using discipline to avoid grief, or sometimes building a life that looks successful but doesn't feel soul aligned. And this is where shadow work becomes important because Capricorn is not here to reject responsibility. Capricorn is here to purify its relationship to responsibility. And the deeper work of Capricorn is to learn the difference between sacred responsibility and karmic burden. Sacred responsibility strengthens the soul. Karmic burden keeps the soul trapped in old survival contracts. So Capricorn's gift is mastery, but its limitation is learning how to mature without hardening, to lead without controlling, to build without losing the heart, to carry responsibility without abandoning the self. So the deeper shadow question for Capricorn is this: am I building from inner authority, or am I trying to prove my worth through struggle, control, and achievement? This is the real work of Capricorn. Because when the sun in Capricorn becomes conscious, it becomes one of the most spiritually mature expressions of the sun. It becomes the initiate who has climbed through shadow and returned to wisdom, the builder of sacred form, the elder within, the one who knows that true authority doesn't come from domination, status, or external success. It comes from alignment. So the path of Capricorn is not to stop climbing. It is to climb consciously. It is to let discipline serve the soul rather than the wound, and to let responsibility become embodiment rather than burden. And it's to let success reflect inner integrity rather than fear of failure, and to let maturity include softness, and also to let Saturn become the teacher instead of the prison. Because at its purest, Capricorn is not here to be trapped in the material world. Capricorn is here to master the world as a sacred expression of the divine. And it says, I'm here, I'm maturing, I'm embodied authority, I'm healing the karma held in form, and I allow the light of my soul to become structure, wisdom, integrity, and the sacred mastery in the world. Sun in Aquarius. Sun in Aquarius is often reduced to being detached, rebellious, strange, futuristic, intellectual, unconventional, or emotionally distant. And yes, Aquarius can express as independent, innovative, unusual, progressive, and mentally oriented. But those surface level traits do not fully capture the deeper essence of this sign. The pure essence of Aquarius, its higher vision. Aquarius is the soul learning how to perceive wisdom from beyond the personal mind and to bring it into the collective field. It is the sign of the water bearer, but Aquarius is not a water sign, it's an air sign. So the water that Aquarius carries is not ordinary emotional water. It is the symbolic water of higher knowledge, divine intelligence, spiritual insight, and future consciousness. So where Capricorn says, I master the world of form, Aquarius says, I receive the patterns beyond the form. Capricorn builds a structure, but Aquarius receives the higher design. Capricorn works within time. Aquarius opens to what is ahead of time. So, when the sun is in Aquarius, the inner light seeks to express itself through originality, higher perception, innovation, group consciousness, truth, awakening, and the ability to see beyond the limitations of the current system. And there is something in Aquarius that is not meant to think like everyone else. It is meant to perceive differently, to question the structure, to see the pattern, to receive the download, to carry future knowledge, to bring higher wisdom into the human field. And esoterically, Aquarius carries the mystery of the water bearer. The water bearer stands between heaven and earth, holding the vessel of higher knowledge and pouring it down into the world. And this is the higher divine intelligence descending through the higher mind. Aquarius receives through the upper field of consciousness, through insight, through sudden knowing, through pattern recognition, through intuition that comes from the mind rather than through emotion, through downloads that seem to arrive from beyond the personal self. But the higher mind must be aligned with the divine, or the information can become distorted through ego, rebellion, chaos, superiority, or mental fragmentation. So this is very important for Aquarius because Aquarius can access higher knowledge, but it must learn how to become a clear vessel for that knowledge. The download is not enough. The vessel must be coherent. The nervous system must be steady enough to hold what comes through. The heart must remain connected enough so that the knowledge doesn't become cold, detached, or disconnected from human feeling. In astrotheology, Aquarius is connected to pouring out of living waters and the descent of the higher wisdom into the collective. And it is a sign that comes from Capricorn's mountain after the soul has matured through form and is ready to receive a more universal vision. So Aquarius asks, what is the higher pattern? What is the future trying to reveal? What truth belongs to the collective, not only personal self? What knowledge holds? What knowledge wants to be poured through me for the evolution of consciousness? But the gift of the sun in Aquarius is not just originality. It is visionary intelligence. It is the ability to see beyond personal conditioning, social programming, outdated structures, and inherited systems. Aquarius can perceive the blueprint before others know what is changing. It can sense what humanity is moving towards. It can carry ideas that feel strange at first because they belong to the future. At its highest, Aquarius is visionary, wise, innovative, honest, awakening, humanitarian, clear-minded, and deeply devoted to the evolution of consciousness. Aquarius reminds us that consciousness is not only meant to mature through form, it is also meant to receive higher knowledge and pour it into the world. But the shadow of Aquarius begins when higher vision becomes separation. Because the same focus that allows Aquarius to see beyond the current system, when unconscious, becomes detachment, alienation, superiority, rebellion, emotional avoidance, coldness, or a disconnection from the body and heart. Instead of receiving higher wisdom, Aquarius can become identified with being different. Instead of serving the collective, it may become isolated from the collective. Instead of carrying future consciousness, it may reject the present moment. Instead of awakening the mind, it may use the mind to stay above feeling. So this is where Aquarius can become misunderstood. People may see the detachment, the unpredictability, the rebellion, the emotional distance, and assume Aquarius does not care. But often what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned how to bring higher knowledge down into the heart and body. There's a difference between divine detachment and emotional disconnection. Divine detachment allows clear seeing. Emotional disconnection avoids intimacy, vulnerability, and human feeling. And this distinction is very important for the sun in Aquarius because Aquarius can sometimes confuse perspective with presence. It may believe that because it can see the larger pattern, the more objective position, it has moved beyond the personal wounds. It may assume that because it understands humanity, it doesn't have to feel its own human tenderness. And it may live in the higher mind while the emotional body remains unseen. But higher knowledge is not the same as integration, and insight is not the same as embodiment. Since Aquarius rises into the mental field because the body feels too dense, then the heart feels too vulnerable, and the ordinary human need feels uncomfortable. So the shadow of the sun in Aquarius can look like emotional detachment, superiority, rebellion without grounding, alienation, inconsistency, nervous system overstimulation, or identifying with being the outsider. It can look like receiving powerful insights but struggling to live them, understanding humanity while avoiding one's own heart, needing to be different in order to feel significant, or rejecting tradition simply because it feels restrictive, or using the mind to rise above pain instead of entering the feeling honestly, pouring wisdom into others while remaining disconnected from the self. And this is where shadow work becomes important, because Aquarius is not here to shut down its higher mind. Aquarius is here to purify the vessel. The deeper work of Aquarius is learning the difference between true higher knowledge and mental dissociation. Higher knowing descends through alignment. Mental dissociation moves away from discomfort. So Aquarius gift is vision, but its initiation is learning how to let the lower mind serve the whole being, not bypassing the heart, the body, or the emotional truth. The download must become embodied. The vision must become humane. The wisdom must become warm enough to touch life. So the deeper shadow question for Aquarius is this: am I receiving wisdom through alignment, or am I using the higher mind to stay detached from what I do not want to feel? That is the real work of Aquarius, because when the sun in Aquarius becomes conscious, it becomes a sacred vessel of future consciousness, the water bearer, the one who receives from above and pours into the collective, the one who carries knowledge for the evolution of humanity without losing connection to the heart. So the path of Aquarius is not to become ordinary, it is to become embodied in its originality, to let vision serve love, to let knowledge become wisdom, to let rebellion become revelation, and to let detachment become clearer seeing rather than emotional distance. Also, it is to let the higher mind remain connected to the sacred heart, because at its purest, Aquarius is not here to be different just to be different. Aquarius is here to carry the living water of higher consciousness into the world. It says, I am here, I'm receiving, I'm the sacred vessel of higher mind. I am the water bearer of divine wisdom. I allow the light of my soul to pour through me as vision, truth, awakening, and collective liberation. Is often reduced to being emotional, dreamy, sensitive, escapist, artistic, spiritual, or hard to define. And yes, Pisces can express as imaginative or compassionate, as well as intuitive, mystical, and deeply feeling. But those surface level traits do not fully capture the deeper essence of this sign. The deeper essence of Pisces is not escape, it's divine union. Pisces is the soul remembering that beneath separation, beneath identity, beneath personality, beneath the wounds, beneath the roles we play in the world, all life is connected to one divine source. So where Aquarius says, I receive the higher pattern, Pisces says, I dissolve back into the one. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. It holds the memory of all the signs before it. It is the end of the cycle where the soul begins to release attachment to the separate self and return to the ocean of consciousness. So when the sun is in Pisces, the inner light seeks to express itself through compassion, imagination, intuition, surrender, devotion, forgiveness, spiritual sensitivity, and the longing to merge with something greater than the personal self. And there is something in Pisces that is not meant to live only in hard edges. It is meant to soften, to feel beyond the visible, to dream, to surrender, to receive the unseen, and to remember the divine behind all forms. And esoterically, Pisces the mystery of Christ consciousness. This does not have to be understood only through religion. It can be understood symbolically as unity consciousness, the awakened heart that sees beyond separation and recognizes the divine presence within all life. Pisces is deeply linked to the story of Jesus, the fisherman, the fish, the sea, compassion, sacrifice, forgiveness, the healing waters of spiritual love. So the symbol of Pisces is two fish swimming in opposite directions. And this is a profound image because one fish moves towards spirit, the other fish moves towards matter. One fish longs to return to source, and the other fish still is bound to the world of form, emotion, desire, suffering, and human experience. And this is the Pisces initiation, to unite what feels divided. Spirit, matter, heaven, earth, body, soul, human love and divine love, personal self, and the eternal self. Pisces carries the memories of all polarities, ultimately seeking union. And the two fish appear to swim in opposite directions, but they are still bound together by one cord. And this is the mystery of the soul of Pisces. Even in separation, there's a hidden unity. Even in suffering, there's a longing for return. And even in the human wound, there's a divine invitation to return to the one. And this is why Pisces can be so spiritually sensitive. It feels the invisible thread connecting all things. It can sense grief that has not yet been spoken, beauty that has not yet been named, and suffering that belongs not only to the self, but to the collective field. So the gift of Sun in Pisces is not just sensitivity, it's sacred compassion. It is the ability to feel beyond the boundaries of the personal self and to recognize the soul inside another being. It's the ability to bring imagination, mercy, tenderness, and spiritual vision into a world that often forgets its own divinity. At its highest, Pisces is compassionate, mystical, forgiving, creative, devotional, intuitive, healing, and deeply connected to the invisible dimensions of life. Pisces reminds us that consciousness is not only meant to awaken, build, transform, or understand, it is also meant to surrender. But the shadow of Pisces begins when surrender becomes escape, because the same force that allows Pisces to dissolve into the divine can, when unconscious, become avoidance, confusion, fantasy, victimhood, self-sacrifice, addiction, emotional overwhelm, or spiritual bypassing. So instead of divine surrender, Pisces may collapse. Instead of compassion, it may abandon itself. Instead of unity consciousness, it may lose discernment. Instead of forgiveness, it may tolerate what harms the soul. Instead of spiritual sensitivity, it may become flooded by everything it feels. And this is where Pisces can become misunderstood. So people may see the softness and the dreaminess and the emotional openness or the lack of clear boundaries and assume Pisces is weak or unrealistic. But often what is really happening is that the person has not yet learned how to stay embodied while feeling the infinite. There's a difference between spiritual surrender and self-abandonment. Spiritual surrender says, I trust the divine while remaining present within myself, while self-abandonment says, I disappear because being here feels too painful. And this distinction is very important for the Sun in Pisces, because Pisces can sometimes confuse compassion with merging. It may believe that loving someone means absorbing their pain. It may assume that forgiveness means ignoring the wound. It may feel guilty for having boundaries because boundaries may feel like separation. But boundaries are not the enemy of love. They are the vessel that allows love to remain clear. Even the ocean needs a shore for the human body to stand. So the shadow of Sun in Pisces can look like escapism, confusion, being the savior, emotional overwhelm, fantasy, avoidance, addictions, addiction to longing, feeling sorry for themselves, or losing the self in someone else's suffering. It can look like forgiving too quickly before truth has been felt, or feeling someone's pain but neglecting their own body, or using spirituality to avoid practical responsibility, or romanticizing suffering as a proof of love, or mistaking a collapse for surrender, or longing for God while rejecting the human self that is asking to be held. And this is where shadow work becomes important, because Pisces is not here to lose itself in the divine. Pisces is here to remember the divine without abandoning the self. And the deeper work of Pisces is learning the difference between unity and fusion. While unity honors all life as sacred, fusion loses the self inside another person, dream, belief, or spiritual longing. So Pisces' gift is compassion, but its initiation is learning how to remain clear inside compassion, to feel deeply without drowning, to love without disappearing, to forgive without bypassing truth, to surrender without collapsing, to unite spirit and matter within the body. And this is the deeper Piscean mystery. The two fish must be brought into one current: the mystery self, the spiritual self, and the human self, the divine longing and the earthly responsibility, the infinite ocean and the embodied vessel, the Christ light and the wounded heart. So the deeper shadow question for Pisces is this: am I surrendering in infinite truth, or am I escaping into fantasy because I don't want to feel the pain of being human? That is the real work for Pisces, because when the sun in Pisces becomes conscious, it becomes one of the most compassionate and spiritually luminous expressions of the sun. It becomes the mystic heart, the soul that remembers oneness, the vessel through which divine love can move into the human world without becoming distorted by illusion or self-loss. So the path of Pisces is not to become less sensitive. It is to become more conscious inside sensitivity, to let compassion include the self, to let forgiveness include truth, to let surrender include embodiment, to let imagination become sacred vision rather than escape, and to let divine love flow through the heart without dissolving the human vessel. Because at its purest, Pisces is not here to disappear in the ocean. Pisces is here to unite spirit and matter through love. It says, I am here, I am surrendering. I am the sacred ocean of divine compassion. I am the two fish returning to one current. And I allow the light of my soul to become forgiveness, unity, devotion, and Christ consciousness embodied through love. So your sun sign is not just a personality type, it's the light within you, the authentic essence beneath the conditioning, beneath the emotional defenses, beneath the false self. So shadow work is what helps to recognize where the light has been distorted, hidden, performed, or even protected. And as we witness those patterns more honestly, the sun begins to shine through us with more clarity. So if this video resonated with you, you're welcome to subscribe, like, hit the hype button. Thank you. I appreciate when you do. And also share with anyone who might find this interesting. And also, I want to remind you that I do offer a free weekly shadow work circle every Tuesday at 7 p.m. US Eastern Time, which is 4 p.m. Pacific, where we practice self-witnessing, emotional awareness, shadow integration in a very grounded work. The circle is for reflection and for self-awareness. Also, I do offer natal chart readings and one-on-one shadow work sessions if you'd like a more personal approach. And everything is on my website at starwellastro.com. So thank you for being here, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.